People at all levels need to have a discussion about money. They need to understand where money comes from, how it's issued, who's issuing it. In the case the United States, we have the Federal Reserve. This is something that you do not get in high school, you do not get in college, and you're probably not going to get in a lot of your work environment. Even if you're working for a bank, you're not really trained in how the money system works. There's only a handful of people that really truly understand how our Federal Reserve System works that creates all the money we're using.
The market opened in an absolutely free fall, and some people couldn't even get any bids for their shares, and it was wild panic. And an ugly crowd gathered outside the stock exchange, and it was described as making weird and threatening noises. It was indeed one of the worst days that had ever been seen down there.
Rip off the American public. All right, take our money and run with it.
Bush and Paulson are taking our hard-earned tax dollars to buy useless junk financial instruments from Wall Street, right? That have no value. They're just going to assign an arbitrary value on it just to infuse a lot of cash into the pockets of the people that got us into this mess.
You don't actually get anything for your taxes at all at this point.
I think that's just taking advantage of a crisis in order to frighten the American people into submission.
Don't believe Bush's lies.
People for a long time always thought of debt as something to be avoided at all costs because it does lead to slavery, as it says in the Bible. Borrower becomes slave to the lender. There is a definite connection between debt and slavery. You'll hear we live in a service society. Banking is considered a service industry. America's moving towards a service economy, service. But if we look at the word service, we find the word service in English comes directly from the Latin word servus, which is S-E-R-V-U-S, and the Latin word servus means slave.
The United States economy is the greatest wealth creation machine the world has ever known. And it works to the extent that it's allowed to take the unfettered creativity and energy of the American population and create new things and give them a reason to expect that they're going to be able to reap the benefits of those investments and inventions and creative activities. The U.S. government is incapable of creating wealth and new income on its own because all it does is move money around. The problem is over the last, in some ways since 1983, 1984 in the first Reagan administration, but especially under the Bush administration, Bush administration has actually been the largest tax increasing administration in American history. And that seems odd when you first think of it because in some ways the Bush administration reduced tax rates. But by reducing tax rates and then fighting a war where we're spending billions of dollars every day somewhere else, we're increasing our annual debt. The sum of the annual debt is the deficit. So my son, my older son, my younger son, each of them owe $37,000, $38,000 to the government because those are future taxes. The thing I think people don't realize is that the federal deficit is future taxes. So we are now being enslaved by the federal government in a way because I've got a $37,000 mortgage I didn't ask for, and so do both of my sons. That's going to have to be paid off.
A lot of people that might have gone to church sometime in their life and possibly recited the Lord's Prayer, they may have been confused sometimes. Sometimes you'll go into a church and the people will recite it, they'll talk about, our Father who art in heaven, and you get to the point where it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Some versions translated as forgive us our debts as we forgive those who are indebted to us. Others translated as forgive us our sins as we forgive those who have sinned against us. So there's these three different versions that floating around out there. And the reason for that difference is if you look again back into the derivation of the words, in the language that Jesus spoke in, Aramaic, which the Lord's Prayer was given in Aramaic, the word for sin and debt was the same word. So when translators had to translate, they weren't sure which way to translate. Did he mean sin? Did he mean debt? But obviously back to the ancient Aramaeans, they felt that there was enough of a correlation between the two words that it was really not worth separating them. So we have a word that simply means both sin and debt, which obviously sin is not a good thing, so you might tend to think that debt might not be a good thing. Bondage is a great word. I think everybody understands that bondage is not something you want to be in, but nobody thinks twice about going out and voting in their local elections for the school bond or the Parks and Recreations bond. But where the word bond there's a connection there between the word bond and bondage. Obviously, bondage is derived from the word bond, which means to bind somebody in some way. And so, in effect, what we're doing in these bond sales is we're binding people to contracts, which in certain cases could be, construed as tying yourself into some kind of a bondage situation. And what is bondage but slavery?
A lot of people have purchased federal debt. A lot of people have overspent on their own homes because we have a system that fosters, not just intellectually, but also in legal terms, easy debt, easy credit. And as a result, many people are in a position, partly because of the reduction of home prices, they're in a position where they really have no realistic hope ever of getting out of debt. And we can't, one thing we know we can't do is say we're going to declare a debt holiday like some country in Africa or South America might do. But what is the solution? What's going to change? And I think the only thing that could happen is individuals start showing more responsibility. That's not going to happen until the government does.